CBS correspondent Christina Ruffini joins us. She's at the White House, was also listening in to the Defense Secretary and Joint Chiefs Chairman there as they made their remarks. Christina, the Defense Secretary said there was deliberate cruelty of Russia and its recent barrage on Ukraine. He described them as atrocities, and we know that the focus of this meeting is to provide Ukraine with the air defenses it needs. On CNN last night, President Biden discussed President Vladimir Putin's threats of using nuclear weapons. Let's play a clip of that for our audience and get your reaction on the other side.
When I'm talking to Putin. He, in fact, cannot continue with impunity to talk about the use of a tactical nuclear weapon as if that's a rational thing to do. The mistakes get made, and the miscalculation could occur. No one can be sure what would happen, and it could end in Armageddon.
The president there referring to Putin's threats of nuclear weaponry and its use. What type of action could the U.S. take if Putin continues this type of rhetoric?
Well, I mean, there is no action you can take against another leader for saying things, right? We hear inflammatory things from world leaders all around the world all the time, including sometimes from a U.S. leader. The issue is, you know, how will the U.S. respond? And President Biden also said in that interview, you know, he doesn't think that Putin will really use these weapons. And I think that's the overriding hope. And it seems like he's stepping back a little bit from his original comments about Armageddon, although you did hear that word again there during this interview. You know, the U.S. has said, the U.S. and the Europeans have said they're unlikely to respond with a nuclear weapon if Putin does decide to use them because they just don't benefit anyone. And there is this fear of further escalation, and we don't want Russia attacking the U.S. We don't want one of these tactical nuclear devices going off in an American city. So they would probably respond kinetically, but it's doubtful. I haven't heard anybody at this point say that they would respond in kind, just because we've seen the kind of long-term horrifying disaster and environmental disasters that use of those kinds of weapons causes.
Christina, we heard some pretty strong language from both Secretary Austin and General Milley. What preventative measures are actually in place to prevent world leaders from making these types of threats?
I mean, well, like we just said, a world leader can threaten whatever they want. You can't make a, you know, no one's going to sanction a world leader for making a threat. What they sanction each other for is for their actions. So, you know, if Russia takes more action, if Russia, God forbid, were to use one of these weapons, the U.S. and allies all around the world would have to decide how they wanted to respond. I think up until this point, what the U.S. is trying to do is to discourage that. They're trying to get just kind of almost an international diplomatic peer pressure campaign going to say, hey, this is not a thing a rational leader would say to not only his population, but to the world. The issue in there is there's been a long simmering debate as to whether or not you're dealing with a rational actor. And of course, you know, that's different how we would define that person and how a domestic population would define that person. But it does seem like an irrational thing even to threaten the use of nuclear weapons, given that we know what happens after you use one, not just to Ukraine, but to Russia, to Europe, to anyone in the area, and to the rest of the world.
And I think it's likely why this contact group is focusing on air defenses. Ukraine has consistently said we need stronger weapons. We need to kind of limit Russia's ability to enact the kind of attacks they did this past week with 100 missiles, killing almost 26 people. So good to get Christina's reaction to that live press conference. I want to pivot now to the day ahead because President Biden is off to Colorado, establishing a new national monument. Explain to our viewers the significance of this trip and how this plays into the White House's push now ahead of midterm elections.
Well, I don't think the Colorado trip is specific to the midterms. It's actually an official event under the White House umbrella. But there are some political events on this swing out west, and it's just part of, the president getting out, doing things, seeing like he's being president-y. Look, I'm from Colorado. I'm all for national parks. He's going to go out there and go up to an area near Vail, which is very pretty, and talk about the need to preserve these public spaces. Then you'll see him in California and Oregon. And it's just an effort not only to do things that a president needs to do, but to do things that a president needs to do ahead of midterms if he wants to, boost his party. And you're going to see him and Speaker Pelosi going to a Democratic fundraiser in Los Angeles. And it's also just a chance to get new places, have his face seen different spots, and press the issues that are important to this administration and this White House.
Leading up to the midterms, Christina Ruffini, thank you so much for breaking it all down for us.